Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are finally taking a more detailed look at the Airbus A310. It's an aircraft that I've certainly been looking forward to getting to grips with, and judging by the results of our community poll, it's an aircraft you wanted to see more of as well. I have to say it's been rather interesting getting up to speed with the 310. Obviously the aircraft does share a lot in common with the more modern Airbus family. Equally though, there are quite a few differences as well, and I can certainly see how an aircraft like the 300, and indeed the A310, really bridge the gap between a more conventional aircraft and a modern fly-by-wire Airbus. Anyway, the aim of our flight today is to get more familiar with the jet, certainly for myself and hopefully for you guys as well. For our flight today we're going to be recreating a real-world American Airlines service, American 2769, from Dallas-Fort Woth, where we're currently on the ground, over towards Seattle. We'll be mirroring the real-world service pretty closely here. We're currently on stand Delta 31, as was the real-world American 2769 yesterday. The routing is as per our SimBrief flight plan, initially cruising up at flight level 340. Later on we'll be making a step climb up to 36. We'll be airborne for around 3.5 hours, expecting to be on the ground mid-morning in Seattle. And again we'll have the jet arriving onto stand November 17 as per the real-world flight. It's a pretty full load this morning. We've got a couple of tons of freight on board the aircraft as well. The flight plan has us with 23.8 tons of fuel. I can't see any good reason to take more than that. The weather's very nice out of Dallas and equally nice on arrival into destination. The zero fuel weight is 113.3 metric tons, and that's giving us a takeoff weight of 136.7. We're just coming up on around 0730 local time here at DFW. You can see we're already loading up the aircraft. The crew just boarding as well. We should have the passengers on in about 30 minutes, and we'll be looking to push back within the hour. A fairly long video for you here today. Hopefully we can take a pretty detailed look at the A310 as a result. I certainly hope that you enjoy it. If you do, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. As I say, the crew are already boarding the aircraft, so let's make our way down the jet bridge and onto the flight deck of the Airbus A310. So good morning and welcome to the flight deck of the Airbus A310. We're on stand Delta 31 here at Dallas-Fort Woth. We've just boarded the aircraft. APU already running. We've got the APU bleed air on there as well, just to try and warm up the cabin. It's a fairly cold morning outside, around 9 degrees Celsius. Anyway, as usual, we'll work our way through our cockpit preparations. We'll just start with the IRSs, as they're obviously going to take some time to align. So IRS 1, 2 and 3 all set to nav. Continuing on with our cockpit prep, starting at the bottom left of the overhead. No smoking sign set to auto, seatbelt signs can go on. We've actually got the jet fully fueled up already, 24 tons of fuel on board versus 23.8 required by the flight plan. We'll talk more about that later on. So signs are on, obviously just working our way up through the overhead, making sure the systems are configured correctly, and any lights we're expecting to see extinguished are. Strobe lights can go to auto, nav lights are on system 1, auto throttles can both go on, yaw dampers are on, pitch trims will have to keep off for now until the IRSs are aligned. Galley shed can go off. Again, we've got the APU now supplying power to the aircraft. We'll let the cabin crew start preparing the morning coffee. Electrical looks good. We'll carry out an engine fire test. We've already carried out an APU fire test. So engine 1 looks good. And same on engine 2. Both engine fire tests are good. Wipers both in the off position. Again, the APU is running. Ignition off. Again, in terms of our fuel state, 18 tons in the inners and 6 tons in the outers, so 24 tons in total. Fuel pumps can all go on, so trim tank pumps are on, centre tank pumps are on. Inner tank pumps are on, and the outer tank pumps are all on.
Afternoon, clear shuttle 5758, requesting clearance to lobby.
And the gear indications check. Pressurization will leave everything in auto for now. Window heats can go on. And same for the probe heats. Crew oxygen supply is on. And just working up the right hand side of the overhead panel. So annunciator light set to bright. Emergency light set to arm. Again, the APU bleed is on. And supplying the packs, and we'll leave all of our temperature selectors in the auto position. Down to the main instrument panel then. Airspeed indicator bugs will set later on. RMI looks good. Clock is checked. We've got about another 50 minutes here before we need to push. Altimeters are set. We've got QNH 3043 on all three altimeters. Brake and anti-skid is set to normal and on. Auto brake is off. The thrust rating panel, again, that will come good once we have the IRSs aligned and the pitch trims on. Same for the FCU here. In terms of our doors, we've got L1 door open again in preparation for the passenger boarding. And both cargo doors open. Looks like we should be loading up the cargo currently. Gear indications look good. Landing elevation into Seattle, 433 feet. So we have 400 set. And down to the pedestal. We'll come back to the MCDU in just a moment's time. Nav radios are set. ADF's not required. TCAS, we're squawking 2000 and transponder is currently in standby. On the ECAM, just checking the fuel. Again, 24 tons on board, fuel is balanced. The hydraulic quantities look good. And lastly for the engines, the engine oil quantities are checked. Rudder trim is neutral. Weather radar is set for the time being. And again, just waiting here on the FCU until we have the IRSs aligned. We'll get those aligning in just a moment's time via the MCDU. Just before we do that though, we're going to carry out a takeoff performance data calculation. We're expecting runway 36 right here this morning. And the takeoff run available from the intersection 3906 meters.
What was that call?
That's our shuttle 5758 to Lubbock.
Obviously dry conditions, the runway QDM or runway heading is 356. I didn't quite go in correctly, 356. Wind is 300 degrees at 0.4 knots. Outside air temperature, again as stated, 9 degrees. And the QNH, we need that in hectopascal, so it's 1030. Planned takeoff weight currently is 136.7 tons.
1691 clear.
And planning on a STATS 15, flap 0 takeoff, anti-ice off, air conditioning on. So we'll calculate based on the data. That gives us a flex of 57 degrees, V1 165, VR 167, and V2 170. We'll note those down for now, and we'll put those speeds in just a moment's time once we start populating the MCDU. So coming down to the MCDU, we'll start building up the flight plan, inputting the data. Firstly, the status page, obviously an Airbus A310-300, CF6 80 engines. The nav database is valid and no performance factors required for the flight today. For the route, we're departing out of Dallas-Fort Woth, which is KDFW, Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey, and bound for Seattle, Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha. We'll hit return. Alternate today, I believe it's Portland, Kilo Papa Delta X-Ray. I'm sure any American flyers amongst you will correct me if I'm wrong there. So we have Dallas-Fort Woth to Seattle, Portland is the alternate. Latitude and longitude, just looking at our bay coordinates here, looks good, so we'll align the RSs based off that. Cost index for the flight, 75. Cruising flight level, initially flight level 340. And flight number is American Airlines, or American 2769. Temperature and tropopause fields will leave as is. And for the average cruise wind, we're looking at 303 at 61 knots. So unfortunately, a little bit of a headwind there as we make our way up towards Seattle. So the inner A page has been populated onto the flight plan. For the SID, again expecting runway 36 right this morning.
American 1691, how do you hear?
And that's going to be for a HOTAS 2 departure.
American 1691, you're to the Rock Air back for departure.
So HOTAS 2, 36 right, we can insert that. That obviously takes us out towards waypoint HOTAS. From there we're going to be tracking direct to the Papa November Hotel VOR. It's a pretty straightforward route today actually, just tracking directly to VORs all the way up towards Seattle. And we're looking for the top line there, Papa November Hotel. Next direct to Tango Bravo Echo. And there we're looking for the bottom line, 37 north, 103 west. After that, tracking direct to Echo Kilo Romeo. Then direct to Papa India Hotel. I'd be interested to know whether or not this is a real world routing. It's a little bit unusual to just track directly to VORs, but again we have gone off the Simbury flight plan here. And lastly it'll be direct to Papa Delta Tango. And again there we're looking for the top line. The Seattle itself, on the star, currently we're expecting the ILS runway 34 left. And that's going to be for the Chins 5 arrival. And as we discussed already, coming in via Papa Delta Tango, so we'll put that in as the transition. And we can insert all of that. And just working our way through the flight plan. Ordinarily we'd check against the nav display here as well, but as we're currently down here, we'll just work our way through the flight plan. Make sure that matches up with our paper copy. And we can just clear out the discontinuity there.
Alright, Air Shuttle 5735, it was probably a handset issue here. You're clear to the Javi Airport, RDS 7, departure over transition, then as filed, climb via SID, squawk 6201.
And vectors for the arrival onto the ILS, so we'll leave the discontinuity for now. We'll probably position ourselves later on. So flight plan looks good. On the secondary, we'll just make that a copy of the active for the flight today, just to save a little bit of time. No RadNav page. The departure we'll be using this morning is an RNAV departure. It's not based off any navigation aid, so we won't tune up any VORs manually. Onto the initB page. Block fuel for the flight, as we discussed, is 23.8 tons. And our zero fuel weight this morning is 113.3. That's giving us takeoff weight 136.7. That concurs with what we've already calculated. And the CFG is 26.7.
I'm sorry, stepped away from the position, Nicole.
You can see there, optimum cruise flight level 339. We're cruising at 340, so that's spot on. We'll adjust the fuel later on once we're in the cruise, but currently showing arriving with about an extra 30 minutes, which looks to be about correct. Next onto the takeoff page then. As discussed already, V1 is 165. VR is 167. And V2 will set up on the FCU again once the IRS is aligned, but there we're looking for 170. It's going to be a SLATS 15 departure, so green dot there, 237. We have a 240 knot speed restriction initially on the departure, so we'll just about be able to clean up. In terms of thrust reduction and acceleration, we're looking at 2067. We'll set the engine out acceleration for the same values there.
Hockey 3, Hotel Kilo, reback here, good day.
So that's all we can do for now. Again, just waiting on those ILs to align before we select the pitch trims on, and then we can select the V2 on the FCU. In the meantime, we'll brief up the departure. So once again, expecting runway 36 right this morning here at Dallas-Fort Woth. And expecting a clearance for the HOTAS 2 departure, which is plate 60-3 Mike. It's a pretty straightforward SID. It has us initially climbing on a heading of 356, so runway heading up to 1,120 feet. Then direct across waypoint Haskell at or above 5,000. Then tracking on a heading of 277 towards the next waypoint, and ultimately on towards waypoint HOTAS. Stop height there, 10,000 feet. We'll set that again on the FCU later on. Worth reminding myself here as well, it is a pretty high transition altitude in the States, so it will be 10,000 feet as opposed to flight level 100. Aerodrome elevation 606 feet, again transition altitude is 18,000 feet. In terms of the terrain, there's nothing significant on the departure. Again, 600 feet aerodrome elevation, sector MSA 3,600. Weather-wise, it's a lovely morning, as you've probably seen already to some degree at least. There's a little bit of light cloud around, as I say, with the temperature being 9 degrees. We'll probably need the engine anti-ice on for at least some portion of the climb. Nice benign winds though, excellent conditions if we do need to return back to DFW. In terms of any restrictions, again 240 knots at waypoint Haskell, above 5,000 feet we can clean up. And just the 10,000 stop height until we're cleared high by air traffic. For the taxi, pretty straightforward as well. Again, currently on stand Delta 31. We're going to be pushing straight back here in towards the apron. We'll taxi off at, most likely off at Whiskey Kilo, and then straight across Whiskey Kilo, paralleling the runway on Foxtrot. We'll go down to Foxtrot for a full-length departure. We plan the intersection there off at Whiskey Papa just for the worst case scenario, but anticipating that, as I say, we'll get a full-length departure this morning. Anyway, a little bit more setup for us to complete here. As I say, we'll come back up to the FCU, get that set up for the departure. I'll carry on with that as we continue the boarding here, and I'll come back to you again once we are ready for the push and start.
Welcome back to Travel with American Airlines. We're glad you're here. This flight is on its way to one of our many destinations across the globe, made possible by our dedicated team members who all do it for one reason: you. That's why your safety and well-being are so important to us. Let's go through some in-flight instructions so we can get you safely on your way. If you have a carry-on, place it all the way under the seat in front of you. Larger carry-on luggage goes in the overhead bin. If you have a handheld device, please switch it to airplane mode now. If your electronic device falls into your seat, please do not adjust your seat and contact a crew member for assistance. If you are seated at an overwing exit, your window shade must remain open for taxi, takeoff, and landing.
So, welcome back. We just closed up the one door. We've also just disconnected the air bridge, and we are now cleared for the push and start. So the beacon can go on, running through the before start checks. The cockpit preparation is complete. That is our set to nav. Passenger signs are on and auto. Fuel quantity. Again, we have 24 tons on board the aircraft. That checks against the flight plan. Takeoff data is set. We now have 170 selected on the FCU as V2. And we have a flex temp there selected of plus 57 degrees for the takeoff. Altimeters. Again, we have QNH of 3043 set on all three altimeters. Windows and doors are closed. Beacon is on, and the park brake can come off. That's the before start check is complete. So we have commenced the push. We'll start number 1 on to System A for the outbound sector, and engine 1 start. I've noticed a slight peculiarity there in the cabin vertical speed. I presume that's a little bit of a bug currently. Anyway, we have N2 rotation.
American Airlines 733, cross runway 18 right, hold short 18 left.
Cross 20 right, hold short 18 left, local 733.
The oil pressure's coming up. More or less now through max motoring, so the engine 1 master can go on. Looks like we have a good light off there as well, the EGT coming up. And we do have fuel flow indicated. Just keep an eye on the push here as well. We'll just stop behind the main taxiway line.
Regular 733, cross runway 18 left, kind of ground up 185 when you clear.
Cross 18 left, back to 185, local 733.
Okay, so good start there on 1. We can stop the push, and the park brake can go on. We'll start number 2.
Sorry, 2029, the 8th of town, 18 left, halfway.
American 2029, 18 left, we'll line up and wait.
And again, N2 rotation. There goes the tug. Oil pressure coming up. And max motoring, so fuel on for engine 2. Once again, EGT rising. And we do have fuel flow, N1 coming up as well. Tug's clear, the ground crew are clear. So just waiting now for engine number 2 to stabilise. We'll run through the after start flow. And then the after start checklist.
Look at 2029, RFB park 18 left, clear for takeoff.
American 2029, RFB park, clear for takeoff, 20 left.
Good start there on number 2. So APU bleed can come off, as can the APU. Ignition selector can go to ignition off. Rudder trim is set 0. Flaps, again, it's going to be a slats 15 takeoff. So we have 15 selected. We'll just wait until we see 15 indicated. According to the takeoff performance calculator there, we're looking for 0.8 up on the trim. I find that to be pretty heavy, but we'll go with what's calculated. We'll see how we go on the takeoff. I've noticed that the aircraft does feel pretty heavy in this configuration with 0.8 trim up. So we have slats 15 indicated. And just checking the doors page finally. We have all of our slides armed. So running through the after start checks, pitch trim. We have 0.8 up set, rudder trim is 0, spoilers are armed. Flaps, again we have flaps, or rather slats 15 selected, flaps 0. And slats 15 indicated with flap 0. That's what we calculated our takeoff data based on. ECAM status is checked. Anti-ice not required. And again, the ground crew are clear. Let's see after start checklist complete. Nose light can go to taxi. Runway turn-off lights are on. Park brake is off. And as we discussed during the briefing, we're going to taxi out to the right. It looks as though the airport scenery here doesn't quite match up with the real world. We should be able to taxi straight across here onto Whiskey Kilo by the looks of things.
Just 29, Citizen Heavy cross, runway 18 left, cross, runway 18 right at Zulu, taxi, follow the ramp.
Instead though, what we'll do here is we'll taxi straight ahead, join left onto Golf, and then we'll take a right on Golf 7, joining onto Foxtrot, and then continue as discussed. All clear on the right, and all clear on the left. Managed to push nice and early there in the end, we're about 20 minutes early. There's Whiskey Kilo as discussed. Left onto Golf. Next right is Golf 7. Once we're on Golf 7, we'll run through the before takeoff checks.
American 2029, kind of departure today.
American 2029, over departure today.
And a quick brake check there as well. Pressure is 0. So right onto Golf 7. And then left onto Foxtrot. Again, all clear on the right.
Dallas Pipeline 7 requesting on left 360 over 13 right.
Pipeline 7 approved as requested.
As requested, we'll stay clear 18 right, Pipeline 7.
And now just taxiing straight down the end. As I say, it'll be a full-length departure off runway 36 right. Just get ourselves straightened up here on the taxiway. And down to the flight controls page on the ECAM. Unlike the more modern Airbus, it seems as though the ECAM doesn't switch over automatically for the flight control check, so it is interesting to note all these little differences. Certainly I've picked up quite a few. Anyway, we have full up, full down, and neutral, full left, full right, and neutral. We're not going to check the rudder here. I don't have a rudder disconnect button mapped to my hardware. So flight controls are checked. Auto brake is set to max. Weather radar can go on to system 1. And actually the A310 is one of the few study level jets where we do have a working weather radar, albeit it uses the default Asobo implementation. Nevertheless, nice to see. Just bring the thrust levers back to idle here. We're doing 24 knots. We don't want to go above 30 here during the taxi. So running through the before takeoff checklist, flight controls have been checked. Flight instruments are checked. For the briefing, once again, it's going to be the HOTAS 2 departure, straight ahead initially, climbing up to an altitude of 10,000 feet. On the FMA, we have vertical speed and heading. Out is armed. We'll arm up nav here as well. And again, we have 10,000 feet pre-selected. Flap setting Again, we have slats 15, flap 0 selected and indicated. FMAs and takeoff data, we've already discussed the FMAs there. Takeoff data, again we've got flex of 57 degrees, looking for a target M1 there of 95.6. And V2, as we discussed already, 170 selected there on the FCU. Transponder.
18 left, line up and wait up with 3708.
Is set to TARA. And below the line, as we are now ready for the takeoff, the cabin is secure, ignition not required, packs are on, and the anti-ice is off. So we'll just get ourselves into position here, lined up on runway 36 right, and then we'll blast off out of Dallas.
American 2444, connect departure, good day. Contact departure, American 2444, good day. American 1612, RNAV to Laren, runway 18 left, clear for takeoff. RNAV Laren, clear for takeoff, 18 left, American 1612. American 2404, DFW Tower, 18 left, line up wait. 18 left, line up wait, American 2444. American 1148, connect departure, good day.
1148, good day.
Right, so we are all set, and we have a nice light wind there looking at the windsock. That concurs with the forecast. Coming up on the thrust levers then, we'll let the engine stabilise. And take off. Thrust is set. It's 100 knots. Aircraft definitely a little bit sensitive on the rudder. Takes us quite a while to get up to V1. There is V1. And rotate. So coming back on the yoke. Again, really heavy in rotation using the pitch trim calculated there. And we have positive climb, gear up. Then we have to remember to start trimming, which is very strange in an Airbus. And you can see needing a lot of trim there as well to actually correct the forces there on the controls. So I do think there's a little bit of an issue currently with the calculated data for the pitch trim. Anyway, reasonably in trim now, nicely on the flight directors. Autopilot 1 can go in. We have thrust, SRS, nav, out blue, command 1, just coming up through thrust reduction altitude. So we're going to profile, and auto on the thrust rating. Rolling back now to climb thrust and accelerating up towards 240 knots. As we said, that's our initial speed restriction. Just waiting till we come up here through S-speed.
Left 48, nice departure, good day.
1148, good day.
And we have a nice margin now on S-speed, accelerating up above green dot. We'll go flap 0. Just coming up through the cloud, the total air temperature currently 9 degrees. So we'll take the engine anti-ice on.
American 459, turn right direct Belico, maintain 17,000.
And flats are retracted, so we can disarm the spoilers. Those lights can go off, and same for the runway turn-off lights. I suspect ordinarily in the 310 we'd take the landing lights off as well, but we'll leave them on today as per the SOPs I'm used to. Leaving the altimeters on 1030. Landing gear as well can go back to the neutral position, that always takes a bit of remembering. Running through the after takeoff checks then, landing gear is up, flaps are retracted, packs are on, and just holding the altimeters there. So clear of the cloud now. Engine anti-ice can go off once again. It's up through 6,500 feet, again climbing up to 10,000 feet for the time being. Just coming up over waypoint Haskell, so we've cleared our speed restriction now. We should accelerate up to 250 knots, as you can see. On the FMA we have profile thrust and profile climb. I noticed as well the aircraft quite often overshoots the turns. I don't know if anyone else is seeing that with a 310. We'll cycle the seatbelt signs. And we'll assume we've been given further climb now by air traffic, straight up to flight level 340.
November 90 Charlie, climb and maintain 17,000.
So we have 340 selected. You can see we've overshot the turn quite significantly there coming through Haskell. I will say though, the aircraft does regain track pretty nicely, so I'm sure we'll be back on track soon enough. Just keep adjusting that weather radar tilt as well.
November 90 Charlie, turn right direct RDS.
It's 1.5 degrees.
Direct RDS 90 Charlie.
And just came up on 10,000 feet, so we'll get the landing lights off.
American 846 Romeo, Fort Worth Center 127.0.
There's 10,000, we should see the aircraft now accelerating up towards 325 knots.
Clear 1971, departure radar contact.
You can see we are regaining track. The aircraft hunting around a little bit there to do so. I was quite surprised by that. I thought that the aircraft is obviously a very slick product overall, so I was expecting slightly better in terms of the tracking. At the moment the aircraft does have a couple of issues. I'm sure they'll get fixed up pretty shortly. And again, obviously for free it's an incredible product. There are some things I've noticed which seem a little bit odd. Nevertheless, really enjoying the 310. As I mentioned during my very short review of it previously, I love this vintage of aircraft with the mix between both the mechanical instruments as well as the more modern avionics.
Number 301 Romeo Juliet, departure climb maintain 17,000.
Same with some of the classic 737s, the 75 and the 76 as well. I think it really sort of hits the sweet spot in terms of interest in an aircraft, but still obviously making the aircraft relatively user-friendly. Anyway, nice to clear of the weather. The cabin crew have had a few minutes now. We'll set the seatbelt signs off.
American 459, Fort Worth Center on 12475, good day.
Tracking now towards waypoint... A little bit tricky to read that there, but waypoint Piglet. In terms of our progress, again, optimum is 341, max is 349. We're climbing up to 340. We'll just put in a fix for now for Kilo Delta Foxtrot Whiskey. And that way, if we want to return back to Dallas-Fort Woth, we've got a nice bearing and distance straight back towards the field. Showing just shy of 1,500 miles to run towards Seattle. Just take a quick look at our fuel prediction as well. So we're showing arriving with 9 tons into Seattle, which seems a little bit high to me. We departed with 24 tons, burning around 5 tons an hour I think is about right in the 310. We've got about 3.5 hours en route. So that's about 17 tons of fuel we're expecting to burn, and we had 24 tons loaded on departure. So I think realistically there we're expecting to arrive with closer to 7 tons, but we'll see how we go. Be interesting to see what we land with.
Fuel stream 900 Charlie, Fort Worth Center 133.3.
Let's come up through 15,000 feet. We'll just wait until we switch over here onto standard QNH before we head off into the cruise segment. You can see now the thrusters roll back towards climb in the auto mode, so now targeting 100.1% on the M1, doing just slightly over there.
American 2078 departure, better contact.
We'll come out again on the nav display range. That's about it for the departure out of Dallas-Fort Woth. We'll just continue the climb here up to flight level 340 initially, climb up to flight level 360 later on. Again, really enjoying the jet. I think it's a really great aircraft having the sim. Interested to see as well how we're going to find things on the approach into Seattle. We've got quite a few miles to cover though before that happens, again around 1,500 miles, so around 3.5 hours here in the cruise as we make our way up towards Seattle itself.
November 0 Tango Romeo, maintain 17,000, fly heading 270.
17270, one Camille.
American 1331 departure, better contact. Southwest 444, Fort Worth Center 1270.
27,000, good day, Southwest 444.
Exit 796, maintain 17,000. United 1938, climb, maintain 10,000, traffic 11 o'clock, 8 miles westbound out of 10.5's a citation.
Alright, up to 10,000, 1938.
Southwest 199, maintain 9,000.
Out of 8 for 9,000, Southwest 199.
American 1331, turn right direct, Rue, maintain 10,000. United 1938, traffic no factor, maintain 17,000.
Alright, climb to 17,000, 1938.
Southwest 199, do not exceed 250 knots, climb and maintain 17,000.
250 knots, climb down to 17,000, Southwest 199.
American 61, heavy departure, ready to contact, speed your discretion. United 1964, descend maintain 11,000. American 591, descend maintain 7,000.
I'm 7, fine, I know.
Alaska 503, shuttle approach, expect the RNAV Yankee, running 16 right. Alaska 9801, descend and maintain 6,000, contact approach 128.5. Alaska 1325, shuttle approach, expect the RNAV Yankee, running 16 right. American 1964, contact approach 133.65. United 1964, contact approach 133.65.
3365, good day, 9.
President 2167, shuttle approach, flying present heading, vector sequence, RNAV Yankee, running 16 right, descend and maintain 10,000. Alaska 1325, traffic 1 o'clock, 6 miles westbound, a 737, 4.5 for 7.
So welcome back to the flight deck. I do hope you enjoyed the views there as we made our way up through the United States. We're just approaching our top of descent point. We've got about 5 miles to run there. Initially we're going to descend down to 12,000 feet, so we'll select that on the FCU. And we have 12,000 selected and indicated. We'll pull for a descent. We have profile descent armed and just approaching top of descent now, so we should see the aircraft commence the descent fairly shortly. We've selected 12,000 feet initially as we do have a restriction at waypoint Auburn. Need to be at 12,000 feet, speed back at 250 knots. We have other restrictions on the way down, but we'll discuss those in just a moment's time once we've commenced the descent. So we have profile descent, just trending slightly high here on VDEV, but the aircraft should correct for that. Pretty spectacular scenery on the way in. We're coming in overhead, I believe, the Cascades Mountains currently. Again, we'll talk more about the terrain during the briefing. I believe that's Mount Rainier as well, off at our 11 o'clock. Anyway, in terms of the arrival, as we predicted out of Dallas, we've been cleared for the Chins 5 arrival. Now expecting an approach onto one of the 16 runways. The plate is 20-2, it's a conventional star. We've just come overhead the Yakima VOR, now tracking into waypoint Chins. After Chins, it'll be on towards waypoint Raddy, which is just a beam Mount Rainier. Then on towards waypoint Hump. We need to be below 15,000 feet at waypoint Hump. And then on to waypoint Auburn, we need to be at 12,000 with the speed back at 250 knots. After Auburn, we're going to peel off to the north on a heading of 343. We'll track out to the north and then we'll vector ourselves back round the ILS. Currently planning on runway 16 right. In terms of the ILS then, it's plate 21-3 for the ILS 16 right. Again, we'll set everything up in just a moment's time. The frequency is 110.75, final approach course 164. Aerodrome elevation 432 feet. Transition level is flight level 180. Going down to a Cat 1 MDA of 615. And the missed approach is climbing to 900 feet on runway heading. Then turning onto a heading of 195. Outbound on the 210 radial from the Seattle VOR. Ultimately climbing up to 5,000 feet to take up the hold. Terrain we've already discussed to some degree. We're coming in over the Cascades Mountains, so high terrain on the approach. I believe as well we've got the Olympic Mountains out to the west of Seattle. MSA for the arrival then, 6,400 feet, so fairly significant terrain around. In terms of the weather, there is actually really nice functionality in the MCDU. We can technically request the ATIS from here, and I have used it, it does work, but I've been having some issues with the aircraft locking up and not being able to select anything thereafter. I don't know whether or not it's related to the ATIS request, but we'll avoid doing it for the flight today. So just grabbing the ATIS instead from Navigraph. The wind is 080 at 10 knots. It's eased off quite a bit now actually. It's all crosswind, still 10 knots, but it was gusting up to 27 knots earlier in the cruise, so I got a little bit lucky here, hopefully for the landing. It's a pretty cold morning, 6 degrees Celsius. The pressure is 1033 hectopascals, that's 3050 inches of mercury. Visibility about 15 kilometers. And sky clear, as you can see for yourselves. Lovely conditions on the way into Seattle. So hopefully, as long as the wind doesn't pick up, the weather's pretty insignificant there, no real considerations. Again, just going to be around a 10 knot crosswind onto runway 16. In terms of the landing, 16 right is a pretty short runway, it's only around 2,500 meters. Nevertheless, planning to roll through to the end, so we'll go with auto brake low. We'll use full reverso just to save the brakes. And as I said, we'll roll through to the end, come off at Quebec to vacate. Fuel state, we're now down to around 7 tons on board the aircraft. And if we go to our fuel prediction, that has us arriving with 6.4. If you remember, coming out of Dallas, it was around 9 tons. We guessed around 7 on the climb, so overall we definitely burned more fuel than the aircraft predicted. My guess there would be that it's not taking the en route winds into account. We had some pretty strong headwinds on the way over, around 100 knots off the nose at one point. It's swung around to a tailwind now. Anyway, 6.4, we need 4.2 for the diversion to Kilo Papa Delta X-ray. So about an extra 2.2 tons, an extra 30 minutes on top of what we need for the diversion. I planned on 20, so the fuel burn seems to be pretty accurate overall. Anyway, quite a bit of fuel there if we need to hold. And similarly, we've got 3 runways in Seattle. The weather's nice, so planning on staying in Seattle regardless. So in terms of setting the aircraft up, we've got auto brake low. Coming to the approach page, it's going to be a slats 30, flaps 40 landing. We'll just add 5 knots there for the wind correction. That's giving us a V approach of 147 knots. MDA, as discussed, is 615. And just for our reference, green dot 230 knots. Lastly, tuning up the ILS. So the frequency, again, 110.75. Which we have tuned, and the final approach course, 164.
Alaska 503, traffic 1 o'clock, and 8 miles, turning westbound, company 737, they're 4.5 for 7.
Just coming through flight level 200. We'll get the seatbelt signs on once we've tuned up the final approach course. So 110.75, 164. Seatbelt signs can go on. And flight level 200, that means we need another 8,000 feet to lose. About 32 miles in distance we need for the descent, and we're just coming up on 30 now to waypoint Auburn. We've still got to get the speed back here as well. Coming up on flight level 180, so back onto the QNH, and we said 3050. We have that set on all three altimeters. Definitely going to be below waypoint hump at 15,000 feet. And we'll run through the approach checks. So briefing is complete, ECAM status is checked. Passenger signs are on, altimeters are set, QNH 3050 set and cross-checked. Minimums, again we have a Barrow MDF 615 set. Ignition not required, and landing elevation 400 feet set for the 433 foot aerodrome elevation. So the approach checklist is complete. Just coming up on 16,000 feet. Looking good in terms of our VDEV. And just coming over waypoint hump, so we should be coming up a beam, again what I believe is Mount Rainier. You can see that just behind us.
Skywest 3496, contact approach on 133.65.
20 miles to run now towards Auburn then. As I say, from Auburn we'll be on a heading of 343 outbound towards the north. So we'll just continue inbound towards Auburn, we'll let the aircraft track outbound and nav, and then we'll switch into heading. Once we passed over the waypoint we can continue the descent down and then make our vectoring onto the ILS for runway 16 right.
Horizon 2167 shuttle approach, fly present heading, vector sequence, RNAV Yankee, runway 16 right, descend and maintain 10,000. Alaska 1325, traffic 1 o'clock, 6 miles westbound, a 737, 4.5 for 7. Alaska 503, contact approach 133.65. Horizon 2121, shuttle approach, fly heading of 240, vector sequence, RNAV Yankee, runway 16 right. Horizon 2121, descend, maintain 8,000.
So we just come overhead, waypoint Auburn, 12,000 feet, speed back at 250 knots. We'll come onto our heading of 343. So far the aircraft doing a nice job here of managing the descent for us. So with heading select, we can continue our descent now. We'll come down to 7,000 feet, that'll keep us above the MSA. Just come into vertical speed to do that, we'll go with VS minus 1500. 12,000 feet, that means we need around 48 miles to run. We've got about 10 miles outbound here and then 10 miles back towards waypoint Bungee. So we're still a little bit high currently. Nevertheless, we'll just stay with vertical speed for now. As soon as we're happy we can turn inbound towards the field. We'll turn on heading and then we'll go direct to waypoint Bungee. Discontinuity ahead, we can clear that. That's as a result of us coming off the flight plan here and now vectoring ourselves back round. In the meantime, we'll start reducing our speed. Green dot there showing 220 on the PFD. So we'll come back to 230 knots. Fairly sure we said it was 230 knots. Okay, showing 220 now. Perhaps I misread that earlier on, but anyway, 230 knots selected. And we're showing about 7 miles direct to the field currently. Just coming up on 10,000 feet, we'll select ILS on the PFDs. And once we come down through 10,000, we'll get the landing lights on. We're good on the speed, already back through 250 knots. And 10,000 feet means we need about 30 miles to run inbound towards the field. Currently coming up on 10 miles. So we're just going to level change here. We'll just dive off some of that altitude. There's 10,000, so landing lights can go on. We'll cycle the signs.
Horizon 2167, channel setting 070 and maintain 210 knots.
So in level change we have speed without arm there on the PFD. And coming up on 10 miles, we need to be around 3,000 feet at 10 miles. Obviously we've still got the extra track miles here to make the turn though, so we'll start the turn around 7,000 feet.
That's 2167, contact approach on 133.65, good day.
Anyway, speed is checked, we'll go slats 15. And we'll bring the speed back now to 220 knots. You can definitely tell that the level change mode on the 310 is not quite as sophisticated as open descent on the more modern Airbus fleet. You'll notice a minute ago it actually put us into a little bit of a climb there to attain the speed.
Horizon 2121, contact approach 133.65.
Getting towards the point now where we can turn inbound towards the field, we'll just lose a little bit more altitude. Just a brief moment here to enjoy the views of Seattle on the way in. And again, I believe that's the Olympic Mountains there out towards the west.
Horizon 2141, Seattle approach, expect highlights for official RNAV Yankee runway 16 right.
In terms of our fuel state now, 6 tons on board. Again, we need 4.2, so we've got an extra 1.8. About an extra 20 minutes of fuel. And 7,000 feet, so I'm happy now that we can turn inbound. We'll just reduce that speed before we do so. We'll actually come back into vertical speed here, just to avoid, again, the level change mode being a little bit unsophisticated. So coming around on the heading, and we'll go direct to waypoint bungee. We can insert that, and we have to remember to manually go into nav. So we have nav for waypoint bungee. 7,000, we'll come down to 3,000 feet now, happy that we are visually clear of the terrain.
2141, and this information Alpha current, confirming descending via the Hawk 7.
So we have VS out blue 3,000.
Horizon 2210, shuttle approach, expect the RNAV Yankee runway 16 right.
Just to give us a little bit more drag here, we'll take another stage of flap.
Apparatus 102, shuttle approach, expect the RNAV Yankee
3,400, climbing 6,000, turning 020.
Showing 20 miles to run. So we're still a touch high here on the glide slope. We'll increase that vertical speed. We should be able to do so now with the additional flap. And we'll bring our speed back towards 180 knots.
Medevac 34, Charlie Echo Seattle, departure, climb maintain 8,000.
8,000, Medevac 4 Charlie 7.
Do you have the localizer? We can arm that up. We have Loc in blue on the FMA. No glide slope yet.
Horizon 2210, descend maintain 11, 11,000.
11,000,
6,000 feet, we need 18 miles, just coming up on 18 miles, so we'll keep the vertical speed as is for now. We want to keep ourselves just slightly below the glide slope, which again we should see come in fairly shortly. Beautiful morning views here as you come over Seattle. You can just see the airport there off in the distance. You can see the lead-in lights there for the runway. Coming up on about 20 miles to run to the field. And just coming up on 5,000 feet, so we'll seat the cabin crew.
Alaska 102, contact approach 133.65.
There's the glide slope, still showing just above. We should come below that with our vertical speed there at minus 1,200 feet per minute. So we'll just wait until we're nicely below the glide before we go into land there on the FCU. There's 5,000. Now I'm just going to wait until we're actually below the glide here. I found that arming up land previously didn't actually capture the glide. So better to be below before we capture, I think. We're still waiting as well here till we come onto the localizer before we can actually capture the glide slope. Localizer just coming in. There's the CBD just coming below the nose.
Alright, just 2210, descend maintain 7,000.
7,000, 2210.
As usual, the sim really not failing to disappoint, I have to say. So as Lokestar, we're coming to land. We have Cat 2 and Glide Slope Blue. We'll reduce that vertical speed now. And we'll arm up the second autopilot. So we have Cat 3. Just coming up on 12 miles. At 8 miles we'll take the gear. Lokestar. And Loke. And we have Glide Slope Star. Missed approach altitude we said was 5,000 feet. 5,000 set. And Glide Slope there on the FMA. One thing I have found with the 310, it may well be true to life of the real world aircraft, but it's quite difficult to get a comfortable seating position where you can see the FMAs, but you've also got pretty good visibility over the coaming. 3,000 feet, just coming through 10 miles, so looking pretty good there in terms of profile. And just to save ourselves getting busy here, single pilot, before we take the gear down, we'll take the nose light on, runway turn-off lights on, and we can arm up the spoilers here ahead of time.
Japan Air 68 heavy shuttle approach, expect RNAV Yankee, runway 16 right.
There's 8 miles, so we'll take the gear down. And the wind currently 080 at 12, so that's pretty much what we're going to see all the way down to the runway. As we saw there with the METAR. Speed can come back down to 160 knots. And again for V approach we said 145.
Touching down, wind 0603, running 16 right to land. 16 right, clear to land at 25 knots.
So we do have to gear down. Take the next stage of flap.
Level 134 down.
And final stage of flap. And we'll set 145 for the speed. For the landing checklist, landing gear is down. We do have 3 greens. Auto brake is set low. Anti-skid is on. Flaps are set. And spoilers. Again, just checking those are armed. They are. That's the landing checklist complete.
Southwest 866, mile tower on 199, take care. Good day.
Just coming through 1,000 feet, we are stable. Again, pretty short runway here onto 16 right, so we're not going to finesse the landing too much. We just want to get the aircraft down and decelerating. And we've still got that wind out from the right, only down to around 6 knots now. There's 500 feet. We'll disconnect.
French tower is 2337. President 2337 tower and 16 right, good to land. Land up to
Aircraft's pretty heavy on the controls, that's for sure. Yeah, it's touchdown. As I say, full reverse. And again, just letting the auto brake do its thing, taking us down towards the end of the runway. Okay, so we've vacated runway 16 right, just making our way back in on Bravo for the northern satellite terminal, which is just off our 1 o'clock. Just held off on the aft landing checklist so that we can run through that together. So strobe lights can go back to auto, nose light can go to taxi, landing lights can come off. We'll disarm the spoilers, and we can retract the flaps. We'll get the APU started up.
Resident 2337, monitor on 119.9. 99, Resident 2337.
And the weather radar can come off. And same as well for the window heats. And the probe heats. We'll just wait for the flaps to retract, which they now have. So running through the aft landing checks, flaps are retracted, transponder we'll leave as is for now, weather radar is off, spoilers are disarmed, APU is starting, and that's the aft landing checklist complete. So we're looking for stand November 17, which should be just out to the left of the American Airlines there.
Southwest 936 Tower, following traffic 3 mile final, 16 right to the land.
Just before we come onto the stand, we'll get rid of the nose light and the runway turn-offs.
559, 16 right to the land. 16 right to the land, last 559.
Looks like 17's potentially going to be a little bit close into the American Airlines, so we'll go for stand 18, just to give us better wingtip clearance. Obviously, in reality, you don't choose your own stand, but similarly, the stand that's assigned to you would be appropriate for the aircraft type. So we'll take the stand here just off to the right of the A321.
Back to 767, monitor 199.
A little bit tricky to see the stand actually in terms of taxi and markings. There's no lead in line here off the main taxiway line. Right, so we have November 18. We'll turn onto the stand.
That's 559 left, pop Tango at November, hold short 16 center.
And slowing the aircraft down as we make our way towards the jet bridge.
559, monitor 199. Monitor 19 now, last 5.
As ever, we'll just have to manoeuvre ourselves into position. Part brake can go on. APU is available. We'll get the APU bleed on. And we can shut down the engines. So a good run down there on 1.
Next spot 91 tower and 16 right to the land, following traffic down 3 mile final.
And same there on 2. Beacon light can come off. Seatbelt signs are off. Transponder back to standby. Sounds like we had a master caution there, but didn't quite catch that. Anyway, fuel pumps can come off. So we'll get the centre tank pumps off. We'll just leave the left inners on there for the APU. Right inners can come off, and same for the outer pumps. So for the parking checklist, APU bleed is on, engines are off, Delta P is checked, lights and signs are set, fuel pumps are off, windows and probe heats are off, parking brake is on. So that's the parking checklist complete, and welcome to Seattle. So there you go everyone, I hope you enjoyed our first proper outing in the Airbus A310. Once again, as I'm sure many of you have now seen for yourselves, I think it's a very enjoyable, excellent add-on to have in the sim. As I say, the aircraft really hits that sweet spot for me in terms of its vintage and its overall design ethos. Certainly very familiar coming off the Airbus, but equally the aircraft does throw up quite a few differences as well. As I've heard it said before, it very much flies like a Boeing in some respects, which is rather interesting. And again, it's very clear to see, very interesting to get some first-hand experience with as well, an aircraft that bridges the gap between a more conventional jet and a modern Airbus. Once again, I'm still getting to grips with the aircraft myself, definitely a few things we could have done slightly better there throughout the flight. And as I say, if you do have any suggestions on that front, please feel free to leave those down in the comment section below. My overall thoughts on the aircraft are very positive. Again, I do think there are 1 or 2 issues with it that need fixing up. And as I mentioned earlier on, I did encounter a couple of issues with controls locking up and having to restart the flight. My major issue with the aircraft, it does hit the frame rates pretty hard. I think that's pretty well documented at this point. I gather work is being done to address the issue, and as I understand it, even with the most recent beta of Sim Update 11, already the aircraft has improved FPS. One other area which would have been really nice to see would have been a proper failure model, preferably accessible via the tablet. Unless I've missed something there, it doesn't seem as though the jet comes with any facility to program in failures. Obviously, to a large degree, that would be the icing on the cake. Again, it is an absolutely excellent product, especially, of course, given the fact that it's freeware. But nevertheless, at this point, with study-level airliners in the sim, it seems to be almost a given that we do get a proper failure system. Hopefully the functionality will be added to the aircraft at a later date, and if not, then hopefully we'll see it with the A300. But overall, as I say, an absolutely excellent add-on, a very enjoyable one as well, and one I'm certainly looking forward to featuring again on the channel at a later date. Anyway, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. And finally, as always, a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.